Today is April 6, 2015, and it is my great pleasure to be interviewing Hank Azaria for the Archive of American Television in New York City.
Will you be there the whole time?
No.
'Cause that'll be
Do you
weird.
want me to? Is that easier?
I feel like you're a pirate
like a puppet?
and you're a parrot. I can give the whole interview like.
Arr.
Okay.
Okay.
Camera speed.
All right, here we go. All right. This is going to be like climbing a mountain.
It is. Well, we're going to start at the bottom of that
Yeah,
mountain.
all right.
What was your name at birth?
Henry Albert Azaria.
And when did you start going by
The
Hank?
police lineup.
Okay.
Very early, apparently, our pediatrician, who was a family friend, on my first little doctor visit, called me Hank. And my mother said, his name is Henry. It's not Hank. He said, you're not going to call a little kid Henry, are you? And that was it. That was Hank after that. I'm surprised my mother buckled under that. But, so my pediatrician kind of named me, really.
Oh, nice. And when and where were you born?
I was born in the city, in Manhattan, but I was raised in Forest Hills.
Mm-hmm. And what were your parents' names and what did they do?
My mother is Ruth Azaria. And this is nice that she gets her name out there because I guess on my Wikipedia page, they list Mother Unknown, which drives her insane. My father's name is Albert, and he's no longer with us. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was a garmento. That was his family did that, and he did it too. My mother, she worked actually in publicity at Columbia Pictures in New York when she was in her early 20s. Mm-hmm. She's bilingual. Both my parents are. And she worked in like the South American territories. Like she would help promote movies in the Latin territories. And she gave it up when she got married, like as did many women back then. Mm-hmm. And my mother insists that she didn't want to give up her job, and my father insists she could have worked if she wanted to. My mother insists my father said that he forbid it. I never got the straight story in 51 years. I don't know what really happened there.
Do you think you inherited any traits from either of your parents?
I suppose I'm more like my mother in that she's an extrovert and likes to tell stories and jokes, although I hate jokes. I hate jokes. I like humor, but I hate jokes. And, but I think I got my work ethic from my father, although I couldn't relate at all to loving clothing manufacturing. But he loved what he did, and he definitely instilled that in me. Like, if you find what you love, do it hard. So.
Did you have any strong interest?
And my father's very silly. They both have
Yeah.
good sense of humor. Yeah, he had a very silly sense of humor. And my mother, he liked to play with words and language, and my mother was more of a. And my mother was very vocally adept, although she wasn't totally aware of it. She would like, if she was talking to an English person, 5 minutes into the conversation, she would start talking like this. I'd say, "Mom, are you aware that you've adopted an English accent? What are you talking about?" Like, there, see, what are you talking about? You don't sound like yourself. Well, it was the unconscious mimic. She still is.
Well, speaking of mimicry, when did you start doing impressions?
I was mimicking things for as long as I can remember. Since I was little, since I think my voice changed enough to make different sounds when I was a little kid. I thought everyone could do it. It wasn't until later that I realized it was it's kind of a special skill, and not till much later I realized it was a marketable skill.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, I didn't connect the fact that I like to mimic everything and love to memorize comedy albums and TV shows and movie dialogue. I didn't make the connection that that meant I could be an actor or even wanted to be one. I was doing a play. I remember like a little encouragement along. Like that said, I was always the one cast in the camp play just because it seemed like I was the most capable, or whatever dramatic situation came up when you're a kid. And I remember doing, like when I was 12, doing some little skit at camp, and a counselor sincerely saying, you know, you could probably do this for a living if you felt like it. But that seemed like somebody saying to me, you know, you could probably play shortstop for the Mets if you felt like it. I'm like, yeah, right. And then when I was 16, a guy named John Phillips, who's a great actor, he was directing a high school play. We were doing Camelot. I was playing King Arthur. We were rehearsing. And he said the same thing. He said, you could probably pursue this if you wanted to. And I paid a little more attention then. I thought, like, oh, if somebody professional like him is saying this, maybe there's something to it. And that kind of got me seriously thinking about it. Mm-hmm. I've run into John Phillips many times since, and I've always said, this is your fault that I pursued this. You started this.
So when you were little and you were watching television or going to the movies, it was never something that you focused in on and said, I could do that someday?
Not I could do that. I could mimic it. I could sound exactly like it. I could make people laugh doing that. But I didn't think that meant I could actually do it. Mm-hmm. I also was a mimic, so I was always trying to copy. I had very few original thoughts. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go be this original thing on television. It never, then didn't even occur to me later in my career. I just wanted to copy what was there.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch television? Did you have favorite shows or
It's like asking if a shark eats. I was raised by the television. Yeah, I think I spent most of my time with the television set growing up. My grandmother bought me a TV when I was 5. My parents, nobody knew then, like screen time, maybe you should take that easy with a kid. Like he shouldn't be watching Johnny Carson at 11:30 alone at night, but I did. I mean, what was to stop me? If I woke up, I'd toddle over to the TV, turn it on, and watch Carson,
I heard you were a Trekkie, too.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that was great. That was a gift that kept giving Star Trek, because when I was a kid, I loved it as this great sci-fi adventure. And as a teenager, I loved it as this outrageous comedy, because it was so silly, a lot of the episodes that were going on. Yeah, huge sci-fi fan. I watched everything, good or bad, like things that were appropriate and not appropriate, everything. And I would try to copy all of it.
So when you went to college, what did you decide to study and where did you go?
Went to Tufts University in Boston, and I was interested in drama and acting and in psychology and journalism, and I pursued all three. But I ended up spending all my time in the theater, even though I didn't. But I had lost once I realized I wanted to be an actor around 16, 17, and I was a good student up until that point, and then I lost concentration. I wanted to be an actor. I didn't even want to go to college. Just wanted to pursue acting. My parents insisted. They're like, we didn't work our asses off our whole lives for you to skip off on college. So do what you want on your own time when you're 21, but get your degree. And I'm obviously very glad they insisted. But that said, all I did was I went to the classes I enjoyed, which there were several, and I worked in the theater in school. And it was great. It was like a safe environment to actually. It was well run enough that you got a taste of what professional world would be like. And I met Oliver Platt, was one of my best friends in college, and we did some productions together. And a guy named Joel Bischoff, who went on to direct a lot of theater in New York. And there were many guys who became professionals that I started hanging around with in college.
And then what was your plan after you moved to New York? And did you have a plan? Did you know how you were going to get work?
I had a plan. My plan was, I thought a good plan. I figured my plan was to try it while I'm young, because I didn't want to look back and regret not trying it. But even then, I really didn't think I was going to make it. I just thought should have fun trying for 5 to 10 years. And, do everything I could and support myself however I could. I bartended and cleaned houses and moved furniture and things like that. And then, which was fine. I was very happy with it because I was pursuing, what I wanted to do during the day, whether it was classes or auditions or whatever. And I would work mostly at night. Then I was fully expecting to be back at grad school for psychology by the time. I didn't know whether I was going to, somewhere between 27 and 30 was going to be the cutoff point for me.
Oh, so you did have a cutoff.
Oh, I
did. This would be no more, and you'd go back and get a real job.
I don't know what else to do but give it a time limit.
Right.
And I figured, remember there's a great episode of Taxi where Bobby Wheeler, the Jeff Conaway character, he's a struggling actor, and I think he had always given himself till he was 30. And then 30 comes and he's nowhere and he's really depressed. And then he just decides, screw it, I'm going to give myself a 2-year extension. I figured if worse comes to worse, I could always do that. But I've seen a lot of people, quit over the, of course. And I think it's almost a sacred process, that it's a very individual, like when someone decides, enough, I'm going to stop doing this now and become a real human being.
What was your first professional acting gig?
I got the first audition I ever went on when I was 17, which was partly why I was so eager to skip college. I'm like, what's the big deal about this? It was some audition for an Italian television commercial. It was called Brooklyn Gum, which you'd think would be here, but that's only sold in Italy.
I have one, Brooklyn Gum.
Do you?
When
Brooklyn
I went
Gum?
to Italy, yeah. With the bridge on
they
it.
still make it?
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen it before, but I did the commercial. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is easy, 1 for 1. I don't think I worked again for 5 years after that, maybe, the professional gig. I mostly was in college then, but that was my very first professional job.
And then you decided to move to Los Angeles. Why? And why did you decide to move?
I finished college in Boston in '85.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the theater mostly, and I was one of those artistic, movies and TV is garbage, I'm gonna only do the theater guys, which was New York. And so I came here, and my parents, they had moved to Miami, but they still owned an apartment in Queens, so I was living there and bartending and in the city and getting absolutely nowhere. Couldn't get arrested in the theater. Back then you had Backstage magazine. There was still paper that you relied on. And I was working, I had a monologue or two worked up. I would try this or that class. And I was bartending at a really lovely restaurant called Arcadia, which no longer exists, but was on 61st between 5th and Madison, and nice place. And it's a long story, but I got fired. I was the worst bartender ever. I lied to get the job, and I didn't even know how to make any drinks. I was at the bartending school at the time, and I don't know how I got the job. And I think I sincerely didn't want to be there, so I sabotaged. One night I left the door unlocked, the gate open, the cash register open, the bar unstocked. I just wandered out and went home, came back in for the lunch shift the next day. The owner's like, you're gone. And called my dad, really. I said, Dad, I got fired. I was making a lot of money because it's a good place. I got fired from my bartending job. He said, well, you trying to be a bartender or an actor? And I was like, you're right. And the one job I had gotten post that TV commercial was I had like a line or two in a sitcom in LA. A guy named Danny Arnold, who used to do Barney Miller. He had a show with Peter Boyle called Joe Bash, and had a couple of lines on that, and I got my union card as a result. And they paid, they paid union minimum, but that was like $500 when you're 22 years old. That was a huge amount of money. I couldn't believe it. They actually pay you when you get a television job. So I figured, let me try it out here, for a little while. And it's, and I listen, I can talk, how in-depth are we supposed to go here?
As in-depth as you want to give us. Because I know you had a story about the agent that you went over.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you've done your research. I got very lucky. Young people always ask me, how do you get started? I'm like, you get insanely lucky is what happens. You keep hanging around and trying, and then you get lucky at a certain point. And usually more than once. And, if you're good, if you keep at it and you have any talent whatsoever, you will get more opportunities, for sure. Because there actually aren't that many great people around. But you have to kind of really stay with it and get to know what you're doing. And, I believe in the social Darwinism of Hollywood. Like people ask, how do you make it? It's like, listen, keep at it, and the business will let you know if it's interested in you or not. Don't worry about it. That'll happen. You just keep doing your thing. And, Not lucky. My girlfriend at the time, the one who got me the bartending job because she knew how to lie on a resume because she had worked at restaurants since she was 15, had done a ton of commercials, and she got me an interview with her commercial agency, and I was so green. They were did a courtesy meeting with me for her sake, and then completely shuttled me out of the office. I didn't even realize I had just been told no, because the people are so polite in Hollywood. Well, wonderful, it's great to meet you, which means get out. And I have my next meeting. I'm like, hey, that went well. They didn't say, we're not signing you. And a woman chased me down the hall, named Lucy Silver. Said, do you have anyone representing you legit? I didn't know what that meant. So what does that mean? She said, do theater and film and TV. I said, oh no, God no. She said, well, let me send you out. And something she sent me out on was that Joe Bass show. And then I met an agent that she worked with in LA named Harry Gold, who handles a lot of kids, young people. I think he still does. And he said, rather glibly, you ever come out to LA, I'll work with you for pilot season. Come out pilot season, I'll work with you. So I think a year later, I took my last $12 or whatever I had and flew to LA and showed up at his office like, I'm here. He's like, who are you? I'm like, we met in New York. You said come out for pilot season. Oh, you're Lucy Silver's client. Okay, right. Well, we don't want to work with you unless we know if you're any good. So can you have a scene partner do an audition? I said, I don't have any scene partners. I just got here. So I have monologues. He goes, oh no, I hate monologues. Agent who hates monologues, ladies and gentlemen. But so I got a scene partner from somebody I was studying with in New York, happened to be out in LA. We did a scene which he told me years later he didn't particularly like, but because Lucy sort of pressured him and was angry at him for bait and switching me like that, he worked with me for like 6 months. I must say, in good faith, sent me out, and I got a pilot. I got a job. I'm sure to his amazement, and definitely to my amazement. And it was a pilot that never saw the light of day, but it was with Ellen Greene. It was called Morning Maggie, and that's when I met Matthew Perry. We became he was about 17 at the time, I was 22. And we became really, really good friends working on that together. And, I guess they were encouraged enough to keep working with me. So that would be probably, at that point, the third insanely lucky break I got. And that was just to even get started. That's not the 22 breaks that had to come later.
Right.
Yeah.
And then did they also you had a couple guest roles on Family Ties and Growing Pains?
That was later.
Mm-hmm.
I would work, to even go out on auditions steadily is a tremendous achievement. I remember that. Like, wow, I'm actually going out once, twice a week. That's a big deal. But think of it, by definition, what are you booking? I remember like one every 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. That's a lot of rejection. That's like the next hurdle. Like, all right, congratulations, you go out a lot. No one's hiring you. I could never figure it. I still can't, by the way. I don't know why. I understand less why people want me for this job than why the 28 people who don't want me for those jobs. I don't get it. I don't understand, but how it works. It remains a mystery to me. But yeah, I got a guest role in Family Ties. I think I did a TV movie about Frank Nitti that starred Anthony LaPaglia. That was one of my first jobs. I was on Growing Pains. I did a couple of those. But The Simpsons was very early right in here. There was a pilot called Hollywood Dog, which was based on a local LA comic strip. Roger Rabbit had come out, and people were trying to make like an animated plus live action thing. And that was Hollywood Dog. The dog was animated and everybody else was real, and I did the voice of the dog.
Had you done any voiceover before
that? Was my first voiceover job. And I think based on that, Fox knew of me. Bonnie Piazzolla, who's the casting director of The Simpsons, knew of me because I had done that voice. And then she just called me in to read for the voice of Mo, the bartender.
Yeah, talk about the whole everything you remember about that audition, who it was for, who it was with, any direction you got.
Yeah, like I say, I remember, because Bonnie had heard about me from Hollywood Dog, and I didn't have a voiceover agent. It was through my legit agent, through that Harry Gold, right? Was it through Harry Gold? It must have been. Maybe I was at Gersh by that point. I don't remember at this point. Nope, I was at Harry Gold still. And so walk in a room at Fox, and Sam Simon and Matt Groening were in there. And they just said, we want the voices not to be too cartoony. The tone should be real, but the voices should be interesting. And I hadn't seen the script. I just saw the page or 3 of Mo, the bartender dialogue. And he was kind of a sleazeball. And they said, do you know this crank call to this bar for this guy, Red? I hadn't. There was some famous from 30 years ago, there was this crank call that got famous. This guy calling this bar in Jersey. And they would do the crank calls that Bart did, like give a fake name and he would say it and laugh, and then he would threaten the kid because he got so angry. That guy sounded more like this, Red. Hey, I know it's Red. And I had never heard that. So at the time, I was doing a play in Hollywood where I was playing a drug dealer, and I was doing an Al Pacino impression as that drug dealer. So I was kind of talking like this, sort of early days of Al, Dog Day Afternoon. I did this voice. They said, we kind of like that voice. I guess they liked me. They said, can you make it gravelly? I think they had that crank call in their mind. So if you take Pacino and you make him gravelly, you get Mo the bartender. And they heard that. They went, that's great. Can you come record it right? I'm like, now? Like, yeah, come record it right now. And I walked over with them over to the recording studio at Fox. I had no idea what was going on. And recorded the lines then and there for them. Like, my audition was also my first day of work. And and Sam in particular seemed quite displeased with it. He kept making faces like, no. Like this. He kept he gave me a lot of direction because I was really green. I didn't know what I was doing. My second voiceover thing. And Sam in that, and then I would come back each week and do I think the second week I also did Apu. And literally I was like, can you do an Indian accent? I'm like, yeah. So okay, try this. And then, here's a police chief. What should he sound like? And for some reason, I had David Brinkley in my mind. So I did a kind of a David Brinkley thing. They're like, that's too slow. Can you speed it up? And somehow David Brinkley sped up. Got to be more like this. Got to be Chief Wiggum, which sounded more like Edward G. Robinson, really. And then each week, I'd probably do another character. But it still was week to week. And Sam always seemed very impatient with me. So I was sure that was my last, I was sure I was going to get replaced each week. And then but I learned a lot from Sam, actually, kind of what I needed. He was trying to drum into me I was making it much too complicated. I kept trying to do spins on things. At that time, Michael Keaton was really huge and Bill Murray, and everybody wanted to do that kind of a off-rhythm, strange delivery, sort of quirky thing, which is great. But sometimes you just need to just kind of hit the rhythm of the joke, and that's it. It took me years to just do that. And Sam was always just trying to get me to do that. It's like, the joke is just obviously there. Just do it. It's just you know what I mean? It's like...
so it's a timing thing?
It was. I kept doing little spins and curly cues on things that didn't need them. And he'd be like, ugh. Just just say the friggin' line. And then about halfway through the second season, Sam called. So we want to make you regular. You've been doing great, and we love your voices. We want to make you regular on the show. And I said no, actually. I was like, well, wait. I want to be free to pursue on-camera stuff. I don't want to be locked down. I don't want to be first position of The Simpsons, which is great, but as a voiceover gig. I want to be free. What if I get a job on, Herman's Head, which I was about to get in a year or two? I want to be able to do both. And that took a year for them to sort out. And then eventually they said, okay, you can, well, there was something on all our contracts that said you can, if you get other on-camera jobs, we'll work around you. Mm-hmm. Actually, that's not true. The Simpsons technically had me in first position, but they gave us assurance. They said, look, we promise you we won't.
Like a verbal.
We won't mess you around. Yeah, if you really get another gig, we'll let you do it, work around you. But we have to have you, it was scary, but the job was too good not to take. So.
Why was it so good?
Well, it was brilliant writing. It was hilarious. It was, from the get-go, unbelievably well received. And you sort of knew you were part of something amazing right from the beginning. I remember going, I didn't do the Tracy Ullman little 30-second minute bumpers, but there was an animation festival in LA. And part of the animation festival they showed all the little Simpsons bumpers from the Tracy Ullman show interspersed throughout it. And the response was, I remember it was a packed theater, the response was tremendous. People really, you could tell, people love this thing. You know, it's like, you almost couldn't figure it out. It was like, what is so, you know, and it's funny, it's, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, I'm about to be 51, and that kind of thing, like that animation festival, that's something I'd probably never go to now. You know, when you're that young, you take it for granted that, of course, you go to everything and you're on the cutting edge of everything going on because you care and it's your generation and you want to know everything out there. And it keeps you, you know, current and ahead of the curve. I mean, I think I really knew The Simpsons was going to be a big deal even before it was, because I saw that audience response and was just aware of it, you know, in ways that now I don't like, who's Taylor Swift? I don't know who that is. I'm sorry.
You don't need to.
I'm actually really asking you, who is Taylor Swift? I don't know who it is.
None of us know.
All right.
We're too old. But even though Fox was really a fledgling station at the time, you still thought it had a good chance of...
Oh, well, you wouldn't predict that it would be on for 26 years. No, you bring up a good point. It was such a big deal that Fox was trying to be the fourth network, you know. See, kids, now we have it. We didn't have a lot of networks back then. There was 4, plus like a few local stations, that's it, you know. And HBO and Showtime, you had to really, not everybody had it, you had to actually pay for that. And you still do, but it's not, doesn't go without saying that everybody had it. And so nobody thought a fourth network would last, you know, let alone a show on that network, let alone a cartoon, primetime cartoon on that network. But, you know, in the same way that, like that wave of filmmakers in the 70s, you know, Coppola and Spielberg and Lucas, how they got to do pretty much whatever they wanted because the studios were no longer in touch with what was going to work anymore and were happy to turn the keys over to these young kids who seemed to, or at least had some vision of what to try. You know, I think because Jim Brooks had such a tremendous track record in television, Fox was like, okay, you try it. And they would try to give Jim notes, but he'd be like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. The show's going to be this way. And only Jim could get away with that.
Was he very involved with...
Very. Very.
Did you work with him directly?
Yeah, he would, in the early days of the show, him and Sam and Matt and Al Jean, those guys really, I mean, it wasn't, and some great writers from back then, like John Schwartzwelder and George Meyer and several others, really worked hard to make the show what it was, which is hard for any show, but most shows have 5 characters. The show had, from the beginning, 30, 40, 50. So creating the world and the town and what the whole thing looked like. And we were there long. Like now it's very, because it's so down, now it's like clockwork how we do it. But back then it was long hours, just trying things on different takes. What should it sound like? Should it be fast, slow? Should it be angry? How should it, you know, finding what worked was tough at first. But those guys they really, Jim and Matt and Sam had really strong visions in between it. They were like the Beatles of it. They were like the John, Paul, and George of it. And they sorted it out.
I want to talk about some of the characters specifically. Just going back to Mo.
Yeah.
Your baby, your first. What did you like about Mo?
What did I like about Mo? I mean, you know, these characters pretty much start out one-dimensional. He was a gag. He was a play on that silly crank call. And he was very angry, so it was fun to be that angry. And, you know, to me then, I had all these voices ready to go, built up from childhood. Literally a catalog of 30, 40, 50 of them, of either celebrity impressions, people I knew, family members, whatever. and a place to use them was tremendously thrilling to me. So mostly it was just that. You know, it's just like, oh, I can actually my Pacino impression, which, you know, I'm a kid. I had that worked up since I'm 11. So I'm like, wow, they're paying me to do that. I'm not just annoying my friends with it or delighting my friends with it or whatever. To me, it was mostly about that. You know, later on, as Mo became a three-dimensional character, I kind of loved that he was this complete loser who, you know, like a lot of great television losers and crusty old guys, you eventually get down into where they actually have a little soft center and what's sad about them. And, you know, Mo's a bartender. I was a bartender, you know. Mo sounds like he's from Queens. You know, I joke like if I didn't end up being Mo the bartender, I might have actually ended up being Hank the bartender. And probably would have sounded like this by about now.
And his voice did change as the character changed.
It got deeper. He's one of the few voices most of my voices haven't changed. His
Right.
did. I don't know why. I think partly because as I got older, it was, he started out kind of, I can't even do it. More up here. Hey, Homer. But as I got older, it was harder to do up there. My register dropped, I think. And I also found that it was a little more believable, human, real. I know some people, especially those people who like the first decade of the show, they prefer everything about the first decade of the show. They prefer Mo's voice up here. I'm like, well, then you go put on season 3 if you like. Enjoy that.
Apu, can you say his last name? I can't.
Nasa Pima Petalan. It is exactly what it is spelled. Can I tell you something? It is annoying. I don't understand. Jones or Smith, those are how they are spelled. Actually, Smith is ridiculous. That is technically spelled Smith. But Nasapima Patalan is very clear.
And where did you get that voice from?
That was, you know, when I first moved to LA, most of the 7-Eleven guys were Indian or Pakistani, and there was one in particular who lived near me who was pretty crusty. And I would often have the same exchange with him all the time. I would be online buying a drink, and I'd open the Gatorade before I'm waiting to pay, and he would get annoyed. Why do you open? You haven't paid for it yet. Please don't open until you have paid. I'm like, am I running out the store? What am I doing? Am I going to get up here and go, oh, whoops, I just stole a Gatorade from you. So he kind of, I think a lot of impressions for me, like for example, I can tell when I'm getting annoyed with someone in life still when I start impersonating them. It means it's how I work out aggression. It's sort of like, it's my way of like, saying, I'm observing how annoying you are. This is what you sound like. Isn't it annoying? And so a lot of comedians, I think, say it starts with this kind of a hostile instinct or a defensive instinct anyway. And then also Peter Sellers in The Party, one of my favorite performances ever. You know, I've since learned that a lot of Southern Asian people, a lot of Indians found that Peter Sellers' portrayal fairly offensive. And sometimes over the years, I've gotten some flack for Apu, which I understand a bit. I think especially back when, 25 years ago, it was the only Indian character in pop culture, really. You know, it was the only one. Now there's much. If you're a young Indian American person, you have a lot of role models to choose from. So Apu could just be one funny one, but you also have Mindy Kaling and many, many others. But then, if that's the only, you know, some kids took flack for it in school, like, you sound like Apu, or whatever. So I apologize. But, you know, the thing was done with love, and it was, you know, the best I could do.
He's a hard worker, Apu. It's good work ethic.
Apu? Well, actually, honestly, you know, like over the years, because we have to do like every accent. I mean, the other thing I say when I'm getting defensive about that is like, look, I've done every possible nationality on the show. You know what I mean? Now, granted, Apu sort of got very popular, but I'm an equal opportunity offender if I'm an offender. You know what I mean? It's like we do everything. We're called, and usually we're like saying, do a French accent, and you just sort of do your best in the moment, which has happened with me over the years. And as I get other roles, like after I did Along Came, going back, when I do a French accent on the show, I don't have time to go work with a dialect coach and study the accent. I do my best from what I remember French people sounding like, and it's pretty good. But then I did the movie Along Came Polly years after that, and I really worked on a French dialect because I wanted to perfect it. And so now my French on the show is good. I would say whereas before that it might have been a little bit annoying and offensive to French people, afterwards it's kind of genuinely pretty good. And I never had that opportunity with Apu. It always kind of remained in sort of a superficial, just the best I could do on the spur of the moment. But then now, it would be odd if I went and really worked to perfect like some specific Indian dialect, which there are many, it would change the way Apu sounded, and that would be odd.
Like
So-
Bumblebee Man is pretty the same. I don't think
Yes.
it's much with-
Although I think I've had a lot of practice doing Spanish accents over the years for a lot of different things, and my parents both spoke Spanish, so I grew up with a lot of my relatives. I had that accent since I was a child, so that one was a little more ingrained.
Right. Where'd Comic Book Butt Guy come from?
Comic Book Guy was based on a guy that lived next door to me in college, and although the truth is anyway, he was a guy that was a very quirky guy, and he would, talk like this, and he would yell stuff out from his dorm room, and he had lists, in college you had those boards where you'd write messages.
Whiteboard.
Back in the days when we wrote things, kids. We didn't type everything, we actually wrote things down. You'll read about it in your history book. And he would have a list of his top 5 and bottom 5 for the week. You'd make his shit list or his happy list. Like, you're on my list! He would call that out a lot. And he was a real character. The truth is, though, I don't think somehow it morphed into that. It's partly him and partly something else. I don't know what. I don't know where I got this. I don't know exactly where that. He just sounded to me like somebody who would argue with kids a lot, as an adult.
Right.
There was another guy that I went to college with who was the inspiration for Snake. And I ran into that guy recently, and he sounds nothing like that. But in fairness to me, that guy he sounded like that only when he was wasted, only when he was really high on whatever. And he would come up to me a lot, and he's like, yo, dude, I just took some acid. I'm like, that's great, man. Like, yeah, and he would describe it. I'm seeing like colors now and like an after image when I move my hand. I'm like, great, dude. Congratulations. But then I ran into him recently. He sounded nothing like that. That's all. Snake is also a little bit of Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Totally. Yeah. Lou the Cop.
Lou the Cop is a bad Stallone. It's kind of a modified. What if Stallone were black, basically? Because Rocky's stupid. Rocky's a little, hey. He's not quite that. He's more actually Stallone, a little smoother.
How did you pick that to go with that character, though?
Again, I had all these voices that were ready to go, and I would cast them in my brain. Like, they'd hand me Lou the Cop, and I would try them. Then I would do them out loud, because I wasn't as familiar with my own instrument, but I would sit there and just try it out. Like, well, what about Sean Connery? That might work. Nah, that's not right. What if he were my friend Peter's father? What if he talked like that? Nah, that's not good. What about Stallone? Yeah, that sounds kind of like a savvy street cop. Yeah. And I don't know, it just would sound to me, you do the dialogue connected with the voice, and I'd audition a few guys, and then one would get it.
Would you see sketches of the character before you did the voice?
Very rarely, no.
So they did that after you had the voice?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Kirk Van Houten.
Kirk, I was just trying to sound as much like Milhouse as I could. That was easy. Just figure there was already Milhouse, so me trying to do Milhouse, I can't do kids' voices so well, so it just sounds like a deeper version.
And what about Professor Frink?
Well, that's your basic Jerry Lewis impression from the nutty professor, my dear child.
And you actually lobbied to get Jerry Lewis, right, on the show? Is
Yeah,
that right?
that's the only thing I ever really asked for, except for money, over the years, was said, please, please, he is the father of this character. Can you have him? And the writers were worried about it because they heard that Jerry could be kind of difficult and tough to please, and so they were really trepidatious. I really nagged them about it, and it was fantastic. We flew to Vegas to record with him, and it was one of the happiest days of my life.
I bet.
Yeah, because I grew up. He was one of the guys I threw on when I was 5 years old, when I shouldn't have been watching television. So I'd just be reduced to tears, laughing so hard when I was a kid.
Did he say anything to you about your impression of him?
He didn't. I could tell he was touched by it. I could tell he felt. He said. I remember I would quote a lot of his obscure lines. He didn't only do The Nutty Professor as that. He did a few other much lesser movies as that character, and I knew all of them and knew obscure lines from all of them. And he said, "You've been paying attention, haven't you?" And I said, "Oh yes, 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 yes." So I think he was kind of flattered and moved by that. He was very sweet to me.
Is there anyone else like that you based it on that later you talked to about it, or they made the connection?
No, I don't think so, actually. It's usually a very nerve-wracking thing to do someone in front of them. People generally don't love it. And, it's kind of a lose-lose. Mm-hmm. The more you sound exactly like them, the more horrified somebody gets. The more you don't, the more of an idiot you look like. It's sort of a weird thing to do.
So Dr. Nick Riviera was...
Bad Ricky Ricardo.
Yeah, guessing you never met
Like,
Desi.
he you know what he actually is? He's like Eddie Murphy's impression of Ricky Ricardo. Hi, honey. That's the way Eddie used to just kind of toss it out there, like, not doing a sort of a send-up of it.
Right.
So he's sort of a bad Ricky Ricardo. And the credit I'll give myself is, again, I'd be casting this in my brain. So it could have been a little more of a serious Latin guy or whatever, but I'd sort of go, Ricky Ricardo, I'm like, that's ridiculous, but that's funny. So I was able to recognize what I think would be funny, and the writers got a kick out of it. Like, that was not what they were expecting, Hi, everybody! Was not what they were expecting, and they were like, that's really stupid, but that's really funny. So, and if they weren't shy. If they didn't like what I was doing, they would say, can you bring it down, or
Right.
whatever,
Disco Stew is one of my favorites.
Disco Stew. I don't know where that came from, actually. It's just kind of a 70s cool voice. I just somewhere in the memory banks, is somebody talked like this to be cool. So, and he rhymed well. Disco Stew, ba-ba-ba-ba-boo. It always had to be that way. It just lent itself to the rhythm.
Do you ever throw out improv lines when you're recording?
Not as Disco Stew, because he's almost written like a haiku.
Haiku,
It's
right.
like,
Like
but yes,
Dustin.
we'll, in the early days especially, we would do always at least 2 exactly as written, and then we start playing around a little bit. If ever I feel a joke maybe could use a little help, which is not often, like, well, I see what you're going for. What about this? Or it's so much. One of the things I've learned over the years, it's a lot easier and quicker just to instead of discussing it, just try it. Just in the time it would take to discuss what the meaning of the joke is and what if I did this or that, I could give them 7 options. I could just do it. And tape is cheap, as we like to say, and then if one strikes them as funny, they can just cut it right into the show, and no discussion required.
Right.
So, it's funny, when I first was doing The Simpsons, for many years, I was chasing perfectionism. Like I would try to do the perfect take over and over again, like to perfect what I just did. And as I've gotten older and gone, through many shows and many years, I see my job as just providing choices. I try to never do the same way twice. If I do 5 takes, I'm going to give you 5 different line reads. I just did one that way. Why do it again? They have that one. I try to do that on camera as well now. I try not to ever really repeat myself too much, because what's the point?
Right, and that doesn't get hard or challenging for you after all these, how many characters? I mean,
On The Simpsons?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I'm talking about within,
Oh.
I'm doing Lou the cop, so
Right.
I'm going to do 5 takes of this scene as Lou. Instead of trying to get 5 tries at the same thing, I'll do 5. Let's do one where he's angry, one where he's a little more afraid, one where he's, out of his mind, one where he's bored, and one where I'm going to ad-lib whatever. And then they're not shy. If I've missed anything in there, they'll say, can you make sure to do this line a little more adamant or whatever. But it's much better and more fun to sort of just try it a bunch of ways than all the actors I admired over the years who I've worked with, guys like Jeffrey Tambor, Blythe Danner, or Oliver Platt. They all do that. And it took me years to just feel, comfortable enough to just say, there's no such thing as a perfect take. Just try a bunch of different ways.
right,
You know?
without asking permission first, just go for it.
Yeah. Sometimes it makes directors nervous. You have to check in with them. Like, you have what you need, you have what you want. You want to give them what they want. And then once they have that, then it's easy, it's more fun than just,
Are there any characters that you wish you had gotten that went to a castmate?
Harry got to do Johnny Carson over the years, and he does it brilliantly. But I have such a love for Carson and wanted to do that I was jealous that he got to do that. Woody Allen also, Dan does, and Dan does it brilliantly, but I have such an affection. Those are 2 that, like, in my teen years, I worked really hard to get just because I loved them so much and wanted to sound like them and couldn't at first. Those are 2 of the few that I didn't just get. I had to actually spend 2-3 weeks trying to get it down. I
You
just
can do
did.
it now if you want.
I've done it a lot in the past. But I don't know if this is the correct forum for this. It is? All right, sure. So look, here's my Woody, So just imagine this when you hear it. Dan doing it, worse on The Simpsons. This is, the better version.
And Carson, may a crazed archivist interview your sister.
Nice. Well, do you have a favorite that you do?
Frink is my favorite to do.
Why is he your
It's just
favorite?
fun. Because each take gets more and more insane. There's a lot of ad-libbing with Frink, including the noises. I mean, literally, if the line is, hello, nice to see you, the first take is,
Oh, hello, nice to see you.
and take 6 will be,
Well, my dear child, it's a pleasure coming upon you this afternoon. Go hivelings from Wyvik.
I mean, why would you not? I could do that literally all day, and did when I was 7. And now, it's that.
I guess people don't picture, but there's a lot of physicality when you do these voices. And
Yeah, you have to put your body into it.
Yeah, is there, well, we're going to get into the production of it, but I did have another question about just when you're doing, you just did like so many in a row, but when you have a scene where it's one voice that you do right opposite another voice that you do, and you're having a conversation like with yourself,
Yeah.
how hard is that to do? How do you switch?
It takes over the years now. It's easy to do. You can't talk over yourself or do
Right.
rapid fire dialogue with yourself. And if it's really got to be, then you just record one and then the other. But usually it's not so hard. Hey Mo, give me a beer.
Yeah, I'll get to you when I can.
I have to take that attitude, man. I'm standing right here.
I'll take whatever attitude I want in my own bar.
Yeah, how'd you like me to check on your licenses? I mean, it's not that hard. It's once you're used to it, it's like any skill.
Right, and they're all here. They're all like.
Well, I've been doing
living
them all for so long. It's not
Yeah.
like I have. And if it were hard for me to call it up to begin with, I wouldn't have this job. You know what I mean? If it were an effort to sort of, if I had to go, no, wait, I got to get into the other voice. Well, hold it.
Yeah,
Then
give me a minute.
exactly. Then I wouldn't be doing this.
So I want to get into the production and the schedule of just how long it takes to record the voices for, say, one episode. What is the process?
We will table read them, which means we sit around a table and read them, the episode, so the writers can listen to it. We usually have an audience. We get a sense where the laughs are or aren't. They rewrite, and that's Thursday to Friday. And so we're there for an hour on Thursday doing that. The writers rewrite till Friday afternoon. We'll get a new script. We usually record all together on Monday, and that'll take about from 10 in the morning till like 2, 3 in the afternoon. Over the years, I tend to be, at first, that was much longer as we were finding the rhythms and the sound of the show. Be more like till from 10 to 5, 6, 7 o'clock. I usually now record on my own. I prefer it, actually. Over the years, I kind of know what everybody else is doing. It's very rare that we're going to need to ad-lib over each other. And I find it, what would take me 4 or 5 hours, everybody else takes me 45 minutes on my own, and I do a better job because they're only focusing on my end of it, and so I can give more choices and get more into it.
So you don't go back and forth to LA to...
No, they can record me from anywhere.
Sure.
New York, I mean, I record here in New York. I've recorded from Europe. I've recorded Canada, everywhere. I've recorded from all over the world. Then it takes them, beginning to end with a show takes 6 to 12 months. They'll get an animatic back, which is a crude black and white version of the animation. They'll rewrite based on what they see. We'll go in and re-record their rewrites. They'll ship those out, then we'll get the first color version back. That takes a few months, takes a little while to get that together. They'll do another rewrite based on that, because it's easy to rewrite animation dialogue, because the lip changing is not so hard, if needed at all. So we'll end up recording like three to 5 times per episode over the course of a year for each episode. Yeah.
And then, have you ever had to miss an episode? And if so, what happens?
I've missed table reads for shows
Yeah.
and records for many, but they can always, another thing about animation, it takes so long, they can temp you in with somebody else's voice and then put you in. They want to record to your timing. We record it first, like a radio play, and then they animate. It's not the other way around.
How are you, is someone cueing you, or is there any visual that you're talking along to, just the script?
You record it like a radio play at first, so you're just talking to each other. So then once it comes to picture, then that's like any looping or ADR. You just record it to the picture. They want to animate it to your own rhythms, though, because that if I'm doing Professor Frank, and I say, "Oh, well, it's delightful to see you," like, if someone just goes, "Delightful to see you," now I've got to match, and they animate to that. Now I've got to, "Delightful to see you." Now I've got to get it in that timing, and they missed my stupid noise at the end.
Right.
So they need to at some point get your own recording before they animate. Usually, ideally.
Do you watch the episodes when they air? Do you watch it pretty regularly?
I haven't watched. I watch them, but not when they air. I'm years behind. I tend to binge watch them every few years, like just to catch up on what's. I mean, I'm there, and so I pretty much know what's going on. If somebody says, "Oh, definitely, this one came out great," or "This one came out horrible," I tend to look at those, like the extreme ends of the spectrum. Otherwise, I know I'll eventually catch up with it.
Have you been aware of any censorship issues that have occurred?
Yeah, they're really silly. They're almost arbitrary. The censorship stuff is, someone has to justify their job. And it can get really odd, I mean, one of Matt Groening's favorite bits of shtick is he just did it at the Simpsons at the Hollywood Bowl thing we did, is to read aloud genuine censor notes we've gotten over the years. I wish I could remember one right now because it would make my story a lot more entertaining. But Homer calls his lord Jeebus, which is funny because he can't remember the guy's actual name. Help me, Jeebus! You know, he'll do that a lot. And we got a note. Can you please not refer to Jesus as Jeebus? May we suggest that you refer to him as Jesus? It's like, that would sort of hurt the comedy a little bit, I think.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and those are the exact kind of notes where Jim Brooks would go, "Oh, thanks for sharing. Next." Whereas other people might have to actually, you know, kowtow to that.
Yeah, I just wondered if early on they had to kowtow a little bit more to Fox.
I mean, never.
That's
I mean,
great.
Jim, in fact, probably more so now than back then. Jim was like, and he would, you know, I mean, you can't go on there and curse a blue streak, although some shows do that too. But then over the years, Family Guy sort of got the territory of they're allowed to really push it, and we are not like that. We're seen it more as a family show, which is probably true.
So in 1988, you won your first Emmy for Outstanding Voiceover Performance.
Okay, if you say so.
I say so.
Right.
For Apu. Did you go that year? Did you attend it? And what was that honor like?
Those voiceover Emmys are given out at the Craft Emmys, which is
Creative Arts, right.
Yes, which are the sort of sad little cousin to the actual Emmys that happened the night before. And I can't remember whether I think I picked up that Emmy twice in person. I definitely missed one year. I don't remember whether I was there for that one or not. But yeah.
What do those honors mean to you?
I'm very proud of them. They tend to not. I think actually in the case of that Apu show, I think they got like I was very proud of that work and thought I really did work hard on that, and so I think it was appropriate. But I think often with those awards, for whoever, they tend to be awarding you in general. It's like, I don't, like any given award, not only I got, but anybody gets, like, I don't know that I deserve this one in particular, but you missed the last two that I did probably deserve, so I'll take this one. You know, I think that tends to happen a lot. It's like, yeah, I don't know if that one was really the best that year, but, you know, you missed it 3 years ago, so. Like, I remember, like, Paul Newman winning for Color of Money. Yeah. I mean, it was always great. But I don't know that was particularly Oscar-worthy that year. But, I mean, they should have given that statue to him 7 times before that.
Sure.
So I think that kind of thing happens a lot with those awards. So, you know, being attached to any given one of them, I think is really silly. It truly isn't. Just to be nominated really is the win. Because that usually does mean you're being perceived as you did one of the top jobs this year in whatever it is you were doing. That's pretty amazing.
What are some of the actual episodes you're proudest of?
Uh,
The Simpsons.
The Frank Grimes episode where I played Frank Grimes, it took a lot of, I think I worked the hardest on that, like the most takes, and it was purely emotional. There was no real, there's a slight vocal thing going on, but it was mostly just about getting a kind of, a very theatrical performance right.
And talk about the episode, because it's really kind of more of a dramatic episode.
It was for that character.
Yeah.
That's probably why. I think they had meant it for Bill Macy, who I really, really admire, and for some reason, and he was going to do it, but then for some reason or another, I think because scheduling couldn't. So I sort of had the image of him in my head doing that, not so much literally, vocally, but just kind of that kind of amazing, uptight, you know, put upon character, like he played like Jerry Lundegaard kind of thing, and that he does really easily, which is harder for me. And we did a lot of takes trying to, you know, get it perfect.
But the premise was just, what if, like, a real...
What if a real person had to deal with Homer Simpson, which I also found very compelling. It was fun to, like, because there's an act, you know, playing, look, when I play Chief Wiggum reacting to Homer, you know, Chief Wiggum, maybe that's not a great example because Wiggum's pretty stupid in his own right, but, or say Moe or whoever, you try to incorporate it like, you try to react like, you're really stupid, pal. I mean, that's part of your performance. But there's only so far you really go with that. But it was fun to play somebody who's sort of calling the character on how ridiculous he was and is.
Yeah.
So it was fun to do.
And I know one you like is Cape Fear.
I love that one.
Why do you like that one?
It's just hilarious. I mean, it's just, I think I laughed the hardest at that episode of any that I had seen. Many have made me laugh over the years, but that one just, from beginning to end, I thought it was genuinely... I really like the Sideshow Bob episodes. I think that character's riotously funny. And that one, to me, is the pinnacle of them.
Yeah. What about the Treehouse of Horror episodes?
Those are really awesome. I think that even folks who insist that it's only the first decade of the show that's truly exceptional, I disagree with that, by the way, but then again, I'm paid to. But I think even those people say, oh, except for the Halloween episodes remain kind of amazing. And they're great. I'm a huge fan of sci-fi and horror, and usually we're sending up some beloved version of something with each one. And they're really, they pushed it at first. They were genuine. Some of them are genuinely creepy. They're not just like, those are the reasons why maybe you shouldn't let your 6-year-old watch the show.
There's some episodes that, for a comedy, it still deals with some tough issues. I know the Millhouse Divided you've talked about being that was one
Yeah.
that was, I mean,
I like that one a lot too.
why?
Because that was, again, you were doing some real acting in that. And it's just kind of mind-blowing, like Kirk. It's just a kind of silly character, and he's an imitation of Millhouse. That's how he started out of me. And to all of a sudden be playing him with some genuine emotional stakes in a very rough, bitter divorce that was treated fairly realistically in these moments. And those are good writers. They're well observed. Mm-hmm. And that was really fun to do, too.
What do you think has been the cultural impact of The Simpsons show?
It's hard to, God, it's 15 years ago, but around the turn of the century, when the show was about a decade old, that got asked a lot. And it's tough to say. That was asked more in context of what's made the show so successful. I think it's easier to that's not even so easy to pinpoint. I think the sum's greater than its parts in that, and like any iconic thing, it's sort of, you can't mean to represent society or strike the chord that you struck, because it's not even possible to know the chord you're striking while you're doing it. I think because it's about an entire town, so it becomes this genuine, its satire can be very all-encompassing. It's not just like like a sketch on Saturday Night Live, which is contained in that studio with those 7 actors. You can really actually broaden it out and make societal points. You can't make it else. So the characters don't age, so you can refine these characters in a way that you can't if they're aging live action in front of you over the years. Other than that, I think, they sum up, they're very American. They especially Homer, that sort of well-meaning selfishness that really defines our culture. And there's a lot of tremendously wonderful, joyous benefits to it and a lot of serious, horrible downside to it. And the show is able to actually speak to that always, I think, especially through the lens of Homer.
Does it surprise you it's been received so well all over the world?
That actually does. There goes my American theory. I don't know. And I've seen it in foreign countries. And
Have you traveled to see
yeah,
it?
and you see it on, and people are, and you see it in different languages or dubbed or whatever. And I think although I'm going to stick with my American answer, I think it's kind of like, I think other countries enjoy that it's being honest about who we are as Americans in a way that, our politicians or our PR might not be. Mm-hmm. It's like, they're saying, well, here's what we're really like. We're all just human, yeah? So I think in that way, I know for me, look, I grew up worshiping those Warner Brothers cartoons, Bugs Bunny. I just love the fact that something you can enjoy as a 6-year-old on one level, and then again as a 25-year-old, 30-year-old on another level. Simpsons does that. So, you know, that's always, I think whenever you do that, kind of like Pixar does incredibly well, you know, that's having a real impact on people and families.
Is Springfield a real place for you? Are these characters, are they more flesh and blood to you now?
You know, it'd be psychotic to say yes, like, but I guess the rules of what Springfield is, you know, like what is and isn't so there, what goes there, you know, what people's attitudes are there. It's a place I know intimately. I mean, it's intellectual property, I suppose, more than anything else. But yeah, you know, it's a place I know intimately. So I guess it does. I think part of that, of knowing that so well, is what makes it easy to record now. You know, whereas in the first few years of the show, you couldn't take that for granted. Like, well, what is this society like? We'd have to actually discuss it or explore it or think about it. Now you just know. You know, this is what it is here.
We're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
Just to change tape, and if you need a drink or anything like that, and then we'll...
Have a sip of water.
Sure. And then we'll wrap up The Simpsons and move on quickly
Yeah, we're
to your
behind.
many other shows. So we're at about an hour, so we're about halfway.